webinar about the 17th meeting of the Chemical Review Committee. We will now start the briefing. My name is Andrea Lechner. I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Rotterdam Convention, and I have the pleasure to present you briefly the meeting today. And then my colleague Alain Wittig will also join us, who will talk very briefly about the arrangements for the upcoming meeting of the Persistent Organic Pollutant Review Committee. Starting with the basics that you have probably already heard before. So the Chemical Review Committee is a subsidiary body under the Rotterdam Convention, and it is the entity entrusted with reviewing additional chemicals to be added to the Rotterdam Convention. There are two tracks for adding chemicals to the convention. The first is whenever a party to the convention takes a final regulatory action to prohibit or severely restrict a chemical, then it is then to notify the Secretariat of such an action. And when there are two notifications from two different regions, and we call them the prior informed consent regions, then these notifications are passed on for review to the Chemical Review Committee, and there they are reviewed against the criteria in Annex 2 of the Convention. The second track are severely hazardous pesticide formulations. So these can be proposed by developing countries and countries with economies in transition for inclusion in the Convention. Here we only need one proposal, and if it fulfills certain criteria, then it will also be forwarded to the CRC and reviewed there against the criteria set out in Annex 4 of the Convention. The CRC undertakes its review work in two steps. First, it will review the notifications or the SHPF proposal, and then it will decide whether it will recommend to the Conference of the Party the listing of this chemical. As a second step, after the recommendation, it then develops a draft decision guidance document for this chemical, and then the entire package is submitted to the Conference of the Parties, who takes the decision on the listing. The draft decision guidance document is intended to help parties take a decision, because if the chemical is included in Annex 3 of the Convention, each party is asked to inform others whether they wish to continue importing that chemical. And in order to take an informed decision, they can consult the decision guidance document. The CRC is composed of 31 government-designated experts from the 5 UN regions, and CRC meetings are open to observers. So the members in the CRC are individuals that have been appointed, and all other party representatives, they are also considered observers, just as other more classical observers to the convention, NGOs, industry associations, etc. Looking at the upcoming CRC meeting, CRC 17, it will take place from 20 to 24 September online because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Once more, the meeting has to fully take place online. Plenary session, contact group session, pre-meetings, everything will be conducted online. The meeting takes 4.5 hours each day, starting at 1 p.m. Geneva and Rome time. And there is also a 30-minute break in this 4.5 hours. And it is intended that any contact groups that are set up are also taking place, if possible, within this time frame. There are pre-meetings of the Intersessional task groups taking place on 14 and 15 September at the same time. And I'll talk a little bit later about why these task group meetings are important. As we usually do during the online meetings, normally interventions have to be made orally. If delegates have a technical problem, there's a possibility to send an intervention through the chat to the Secretariat, who can read it out on their behalf. And if it's really experienced that this is not working and delegates are not able to make their contributions to the meeting, there's also the possibility for the chair to invite input by email. The CRC traditionally operates in English only, so there is no simultaneous interpretation, but English only. You can see here the website of the 17th meeting, where you find all the meeting documents and other practical information. Registration in reality has already closed, so the deadline actually was 13th of August. We have extended that to 31st of August. If you really have not registered yet, you can still send us your registration form, but I have to say you will need to be a little bit patient. You will get the information and probably a little bit later, because with these online meetings, we have quite a few preparatory steps, and all the delegates that are already registered have already received certain information this morning. So we will try to also attend to very late registrations, but the information will then be provided to you a little bit later, but you really would need to do so very quickly, possibly today. These are the most important documents if you're trying to get an overview of how the meeting will run. There's the provisional agenda, document number 1, and then the annotations to the provisional agenda, document 1 ad 1. The scenario note contains a description from the chair, how she intends on running the meeting. And the tentative schedule is a tabular overview of how the agenda will be taken up during each day of the meeting. Here you can see the provisional agenda of the meeting. And under the agenda point 4, technical work, you can see that there are 7 chemicals included for consideration. In reality, there are additional chemicals waiting to be considered. Additional notifications of final regulatory action are waiting to be considered by the CRC. But already the last CRC was looking at the prioritized agenda, taking into account the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges linked to an online meeting. There are time zone differences, there are internet connection problems, and simply there is less time at an online meeting than during a face-to-face meeting. So it is not possible to consider all the notifications that are already waiting for review by the committee. So the Bureau, in consultation with the members, has prioritized the agenda to take up these 7 chemicals. And then there is another set of chemicals. Those are amitrole, carbon tetrachloride, methyl bromide, Mirex, and paraquat. And these are waiting for a future meeting of the Chemical Review Committee to be considered. So let's have a quick look at the 7 chemicals that are for consideration by this CRC meeting. That is iprodiol, a fungicide. It's been notified to be used on wines, fruits, fruit trees, and vegetables, among others. And the notifications to be reviewed are from Mozambique and the European Union. The second chemical is methidaciol. It is an insecticide used, for example, on fruit trees, cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, and vegetables. And here we have notifications from Mozambique and Uruguay to review. Thiodicarb is also an insecticide. It has been notified to be used on cotton, grapes, wheat, rye, and oats. And the notifications that are to be reviewed are coming from Mozambique and the EU. The fourth chemical is turbofos. It is an insecticide used, for example, on maize, sorghum, potato, beans, and sugar beets. And the notifications are coming from Mozambique and Canada. 3 more. There is carbaryl, an insecticide and acaricide, notified to be used on cotton, potato, maize, tobacco, and vegetables. Here we already have an old notification from the EU that was reviewed by the 4th meeting of the committee and found to meet the criteria. So it was waiting for a second notification, and this has now come in from Mozambique. So it is that notification from Mozambique that will be reviewed by CRC 17. Chlorphenvinphos is an insecticide used, for example, on vegetables, but it has also been notified to be used on animals. And the CRC 17 will review notifications from Mozambique and Norway. And lastly, there is methylparathion, an insecticide and acaricide, notified to be used on cereals, fruits, wines, vegetables, cotton, and rice. We have 2 new notifications from China and Uruguay, but there is also an old notification from the EU that the committee at its first meeting found to meet the criteria. So among the 2 notifications from China and Uruguay, only one would be needed in order for the chemical to proceed. I mean, one would be needed to meet the criteria for the chemical to proceed, because there is already a second notification meeting the criteria. This is now about the intersessional task groups. In the framework of the CRC, when new notifications for final regulatory action come in, there's a big chunk of preparatory work taking place ahead of a CRC meeting. So the review doesn't only start at CRC, but actually months before, there are intersessional task groups set up. These are composed of the committee members, and they form groups and undertake a preliminary review of the notifications. The intention is to identify any missing information, to be able to have time to contact the notifying party, to ask clarifying questions, to enhance the efficiency of the work of the committee and the participation of members and observers. But in addition, each chemical is fully reviewed at the CRC meeting. The way the intersessional task groups work is that there's a chair and a drafter. They prepare a first draft, and then the task group members comment, and then a revised draft is prepared, which is posted on the CRC website for comments by all members and all observers. So that's all observers to the Rotterdam Convention. These comments are then taken up at a pre-meeting. So prior to the opening of each CRC, these groups meet again. In this case, then those are the meetings on 14 and 15 September, where they will look at all the comments they have received in writing and any other issues coming up. These pre-meetings are open to observers. And then a revised version of the task group reports are presented to the CRC as a conference room paper. So this is the traditional work taking place, but this year a very specific setup has been followed, because already at the last meeting, the committee saw that there's a lot of work that will come up in the intersessional work. And based on a recommendation from the Bureau, the committee agreed to advance the intersessional work for a first set of chemicals. So already between November 2020 and April this year, a first set of 7 chemicals was treated by these intersessional task groups. And those are the 7 chemicals that will be considered by CRC 17. So those task group reports have been provided quite some time back, comments have been collected, and they will now go into CRC. The second set of chemicals, the task group work is going on right now. So actually last week, most of you should have received an email asking for comments on these draft task group reports. These are amitrol, carbon tetrachloride, methylbromide, Mirex, and paraquat. But just to say again, these chemicals are not making it for consideration at CRC 17. They will wait for the next meeting because there's too much already on the agenda that is possible to deal with at an online meeting. You can find here the link to the task group page where you find all the reports posted. And also important to mention the handbook of working procedure and policy guidance of the CRC. This is a very important document for the CRC because it collects a number of procedures that the CRC is using, how it conducts its work. It contains a collection of past cases. So the intention is really to help the CRC to stay consistent in the way it reviews chemicals and how it conducts its work. Apart from these technical issues, there are a few other items on the agenda of CRC 17. One is the rotation of the membership. There's a little bit of a specific situation this year because 17 members of the CRC had terms of office that were supposed to expire in April 2022. And then normally the meeting of the Conference of the Parties that was supposed to take place this July was supposed to elect new members replacing the outgoing ones. However, due to COVID-19, the COP could not take place as expected, and it was thus decided by the Bureau to conduct the meeting in 2 parts, an online segment and a face-to-face segment. So there was an online segment that took place in July this year, but they did not yet elect new members. What they did is to extend the terms of office of these 17 members until the end of COP10, so until the end of the face-to-face segment. And then there's a face-to-face segment supposed to take place in June next year, where these members will be formally replaced. There's a usual procedure going on for these elections. Notably, nominations have to be, should be made to the Secretariat by 1st of March next year. And then the Secretariat compiles this information and makes it available to all parties so that they can see who are the nominees and their qualifications. So that in reality is an issue that pertains to the COP, the election of these new members, but there is a little influence on the CRC that it needs to deal with at its 17th meeting, and that relates to the Bureau, because all of the 5 Bureau members have terms of office expiring now at the end of COP10, unless they are appointed for a consecutive term, which is possible for 4 of the members, but 1 is already on her 2nd term. So the CRC 17 needs to decide how to keep the Bureau operational. They could either elect new Bureau members now at CRC 17, among those members that are for sure continuing, or they wait until the election of new members and then elect a new Bureau electronically after the COP. And just to note that this applies to the CRC Bureau members, but not to the chair of the committee, because electing the chair of the committee pertains to the Conference of the Parties. So for the chair, in any case, a decision by the COP on whether a new chair is elected or the current chair is continued will need to be waited for. Some other matters that CRC will need to look at is a report on activities to facilitate effective participation in the work of the CRC. So their survey has been conducted among CRC members about their needs for participating effectively in the work of the committee. And then also it will need to be looked at how to organize the work in the next intersessional period. Here you can see a schedule of CRC 17. So that's exactly what is contained in information document number 2. You can see that it's meeting every day from 1 to 5:30 p.m. with a 30-minute break. And what you can also see here is that there is, within the 7 chemicals that are on the agenda of CRC 17, there's a certain prioritization. The intention is to give sufficient time to thoroughly discuss all of the chemicals and allow participation by all members and observers. But on the other hand, if the work progresses quickly, to also make use of these 5 days to deal with as much work as possible. So there are 4 chemicals, that's turbophos, thiodicarb, iprodione, and methylation. They are being introduced on Monday and Tuesday, and then we will see whether further work on them is needed. And if the committee feels that there is sufficient time to take up additional chemicals, they will also introduce chlorphenvinphos, carbaryl, and methylparathion. And if it's not possible to complete any of these chemicals or not even start the consideration, they will be automatically included on the agenda of CRC 18. Okay, coming now to the more practical aspects of CRC 17. It's an online meeting, so we know that's also a very important topic. And I have to apologize. I think I saw some of the members also present. You did receive at some point slightly different information about the logistics, so I will correct that now. The meeting is in general taking place on WebEx. That's the same platform as we are on today, the same as last year. And you will receive, well, you have received the link to all the meetings by email. So actually this morning you have received an email that contains a link to all the various meetings, the pre-meeting, the plenary meeting. Yes, that's it for now, and the technical trials. So what you will need to do is when on the day of the meeting, you do not need to register ahead of the meeting. On the day of the meeting, you go to this link and you click on it, and then you will be asked to insert an email address and a password. And that's not for you to set, but you will get tomorrow another email that gives you your email address and password to use. So look out for this second email, please, that gives you your username, your email address and password. And with that, you can join all CRC 17 related meetings. In addition, these links, they will also be put on the intranet. So you can also go through the intranet, but in that email, you have all the links in one point. You also received the user guide explaining all of that with the email this morning. And this email also mentions the 2 technical trials we're holding on the 6th and 8th of September. That we very much encourage you to attend. So that's to check that all your audio is working. And in addition, we always invite you to join meetings early, at least 30 minutes ahead of time, to check once again that your setup is working, that you can hear, that you can speak, and make your contributions to the meeting. The intranet side is this usual page that we're putting up for the duration of the meeting, where you can find pre-session documents, but also the conference room papers, the meeting report, any submissions, information on the daily schedule. And it is also password protected, and that is a generic password for everybody. So that you can find also in the email that you have received this morning. So I guess the challenge is to not mix up that there is a password for the intranet, and then there's a separate password to access all the meetings. And in case there's any confusion or there's any of these messages that you have not received, then you can find here the email of our technical support and also 2 telephone numbers that you can call so that colleagues can guide you into the meetings. And then finally, there's also an email address that is to be used by the members that wish to submit conference room papers. And at this point, I will now hand over to my colleague Alain Wittig, who will talk briefly about the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee meeting.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone. So I'll be providing some brief information to provide an update on the arrangements for Poprock 17, the 17th meeting of the Persistent Organic Review Committee, so also known as Poprock in short. So Poprock is a subsidiary body established under the Stockholm Convention, and it could be seen as the equivalent of the CRC for the Rotterdam Convention. And it has the following mandates shown on the screen, which is to, first of all, review chemicals that are proposed for listing by parties to the convention in annexes A, B, and or C to the convention. The committee is to make recommendations to the COP based on the result of these reviews, and it is also to undertake other technical work as assigned to it by the COP. So the reason why we're providing this short briefing on Poprock 17 during this CRC 17 briefing is that normally in normal times these 2 committee meetings meet face-to-face back-to-back in Rome, but for obvious reasons linked to the pandemic, this was not possible in 2020, and again it's not possible this year. So the Poprock Bureau earlier this year, in consultation with the Poprock members and taking into account the agenda for the meeting, the nature of the discussions, the timelines for the intersessional work, decided to postpone the Poprock 17 meeting to January 2022. This decision was taken in June this year. And so, if possible, Poprock 17 will be held as a face-to-face meeting in Geneva from 24 to 28 January 2022. If it is held face-to-face, there will be 4 days of online pre-meetings, held from 9 to 12 November 2021. However, if due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this is determined not possible as a face-to-face meeting, the meeting will be held fully online for over 9 days during the weeks of 17 and 24 January 2022. In this latter situation, if the meetings are indeed fully online, there will be no pre-meetings in November. So the final decision on the arrangements and the format for Poprock 17 will be taken in the coming weeks, and a decision will be announced by early October. This allows sufficient time for arranging travel should the meeting be able to be held face to face and other logistical arrangements. So on this second slide, you see the Poprock provisional agenda. As you can see, it is quite a full agenda. I will just highlight a few points specifically linked to the technical work of Poprock 17. So these are the sub-items that are listed under item 4. So the first 3 sub-items, A, B, and C, relate to the review of chemicals that are currently being reviewed by the committee in view of their possible listing in the annexes to the convention. And there are different stages of review. So just to remind you that once a party to the Stockholm Convention submits a proposal for listing a chemical in the annexes to the conventions, this will then be reviewed through 3 different steps by the Poprock. So the first, the sub-item A, relates to the chemical methoxychlor, and this chemical is at the last stage of review by the committee. So the committee for this one will be considering a draft risk management evaluation. And if the committee can agree to adopt this risk management evaluation, then it will also prepare a recommendation for consideration by the COP for listing this chemical in the annexes to the convention. Under point sub-item 4b, there are 2 chemicals, dechloran plus and UV328. So these 2 chemicals are at the second stage of review by the committee. So the committee will be considering for these chemicals a draft risk profile. I'd like to note here that for dechloran plus, it is actually the second time the committee will be considering the draft risk profile, as it had considered it for an initial version of this risk profile during Poprock 16, but was unable to reach conclusion that the risk profile contained the required information, and therefore the committee decided to establish an intersessional working group to further develop the risk profile, which is now being brought back again to the committee for its consideration. Under point C, 4C, there are 3 chemicals. These are 3 new proposals for listing in the annexes A, B to C or C of the convention. So the committee will be considering these chemicals for the first time. And the committee will be screening basically these proposals against the screening criteria contained in the Annex D to the convention. So these different review steps and the process are in line with the Article 8 of the convention. Then sub-item for D and E, this relates to the other type of technical work of the committee, which basically, as mandated by the COP, performs periodic reviews of chemicals that are already listed in the convention. And the first is the review of the information related to specific exemptions for decabromodiphenyl ether and short-chain chlorinated paraffins. And then the second here, point 4E, relates to the periodic evaluation of PFAS and PFAS-F. And then based on these reviews, the Poprock makes recommendations to the COP. Point 4F relates to a periodic review of an indicative list of substances covered by the listing of PFOA, its source, and PFOA-related compounds. This chemical was listed by COP9 in the Annex A to the Convention with specific exemptions, and the COP9 also mandated the Poprock to periodically review this indicative list of substances covered by this listing. And finally, point 4G on long-range environmental transport. So this is a discussion that took place at the Poprock 16 earlier this year, and the committee at that meeting decided to establish a intersessional working group to prepare a draft guidance for the committee on its consideration of long-range environmental transport, and this is with the aim to help members in their future evaluation of proposals for listing of chemicals. So the committee on this item will be considering this draft guidance. I'll leave it at this for this briefing. I'd like to point out that a more detailed briefing on Poprock 17 will be held later this year once the arrangements and the format of the Poprock 17 have been decided and finalized. And I'd also like to point out that a number of working and other documents for the Poprock meeting are already available on the Stockholm website. So you're welcome to go and consult those, and in particular the three listing proposals for the three chemicals. Those are available in the 6 languages on the website, and they have been since the early of month of August. So that concludes my short briefing on Poprock 17. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ala, and that also concludes our presentation in general. Thanks a lot for your attention, and it is now time for you to ask any questions, clarifications, or make any comments. If you wish to intervene, please either raise your hand. So you can, if you go with the mouse over your name, then there's a little hand icon appearing next to your name. So if you click on that, then you're raising your hand. Or you can also send us your questions or comments through the chat window. Please, the floor is open for your questions and comments. And just to say that we will make this presentation, of course, available to you. So maybe we do that while you're thinking if you have any questions. So there will be a window popping up very soon on your screen. And then you can select your presentation from there and download it. And it is also sent by email after the meeting.